This is one of the infrequent instances when I feel obligated to share. I handle problems in private most of the time because they're not that serious. But this one has gotten rather complicated. Allow me to retell the entire story from the beginning. Bobby, my spouse, is very close to his family, particularly his parents, in our home. He is so devoted to them that he complies with all of their demands without hesitation. Though he is blind to it, his persistent reliance on and confidence in his family is starting to cause problems. He always responds dismissively and with annoyance when I try to talk to him about this. The main problem here is that Bobby has always overindulged in his parents' requests from the beginning, which is why I'm coming to this forum for guidance. I can appreciate the need to look after one's parents. If my parents were closer, I would definitely take the same care of them. But Bobby seems to be ignoring the fact that there ought to be sensible boundaries. Since we both began earning steady incomes, his parents have frequently requested money from us. It's not that they are struggling financially. They are quite comfortable and can afford various luxuries on their own. Initially, I was sympathetic because they were Bobby's parents, and I recognized the need to integrate them into our lives. But as time passed, my discomfort grew. We sent them a substantial sum over the years, enough that we could have financed a couple of international vacations with these savings. I've tried to convey to Bobby that while we live comfortably, it's unwise to funnel all our extra resources to his parents, as it leaves us with little savings for future needs, such as planning for children or making significant purchases. Initially, it seemed he grasped my perspective, but the discussion soon turned into an argument. He maintained that since we're living well, why shouldn't we help his parents with the extra money we have? This conversation isn't about refusing to support them. It's about balancing that support with our needs and future plans. I'm reaching out here in hopes of gaining some perspective on how to handle this delicate balance in our family dynamics. However, Bobby remains steadfast in his decision to continue financially supporting his parents. This stance of his left me furious to the point where I nearly walked out that night. My anger intensified as I recalled their past treatment of me. If they had been kind and made me feel like a genuine part of the family, perhaps I could have been more accommodating. Unfortunately, they were anything but welcoming. They never really accepted me as one of their own, and they weren't there for me when I needed them most. Back when Bobby and I were just starting, right after my graduation and not long after he began his career, we weren't in a strong financial position. We didn't have the means to buy a house. I vividly remember the day we sat down with my in-laws, poured out our struggles, and sought their help to begin our journey toward homeownership. However, their immediate response was a refusal. They didn't even pause to consider our request. Instead, they lectured us for an hour about adult responsibilities and the importance of saving, advice that felt more dismissive than helpful. Despite my frustration, I held my tongue, choosing to keep my thoughts to myself. It was disheartening to see them unwilling to assist their son. I resigned myself to accept their stance if Bobby was at peace with it. However, the issue resurfaced when I inherited a house from my mother about a year and a half ago. It was a lovely property, but it required significant renovations. We had saved some money, but not nearly enough for the necessary repairs. This repeated pattern of needing financial assistance and facing rejection from his parents, who continued to demand our financial support without reciprocity, put a strain on how I viewed our relationship dynamics. This ongoing financial tug-of-war highlighted a painful imbalance, their willingness to take from us without offering support in our times of need. Faced with the need to renovate the inherited house to make it livable, we approached my in-laws once more, hoping they might help us with a modest sum. However, they refused yet again. This time, they urged us to earn our own money and cease asking for theirs. They even went so far as to suggest I sell the house and invest in something actually useful, dismissing the house as something that looks like crap. Their words were a blow to me. This house wasn't just a structure. It was a cherished link to my mother. I bit back my hurt and anger at their harsh words, thinking it impolite to react at the moment, though part of me now wishes I had spoken up. Perhaps that might have curbed their blatant disregard. Undeterred by their rejection, I resolved to restore the house on my own. I worked tirelessly, scraping together funds and pouring my effort into renovations. Over time, as I began to earn more, managing the project became somewhat easier. After months of hard labor, the house was transformed into something wonderful, a home that I was immensely proud of, a true testament to my dedication. A few months later, I had the opportunity to showcase my efforts. I invited my in-laws over for dinner to celebrate my mother-in-law's birthday, by which time the house looked stunning. I had hoped the evening would go well, considering the usual dynamics of such gatherings and the pride I felt in my accomplishments. Whenever the topic isn't about money, conversations with my in-laws tend to be relatively peaceful. But when it comes to finances, there's hardly a moment free from discussion. On the day they visited to see the renovations, I could tell they were utterly surprised by the transformation of the house. As soon as they walked in, their eyes widened. Clearly, they hadn't expected such extensive improvements. Internally, I was amused by their reaction, knowing full well they hadn't anticipated that I'd go to such lengths. They showered the house with compliments, which at first felt flattering, yet it quickly became overwhelming as they meticulously inspected every corner, incessantly inquiring about the costs involved. Their curiosity might have been natural, especially since they knew our financial constraints and hadn't contributed financially. Nevertheless, their persistent questions seemed less about appreciation and more about gauging how much money we'd poured into the renovations. It felt intrusive and somewhat demeaning, as if the value of my efforts was reduced to mere figures. The dinner that night started smoothly, with enjoyable conversation. However, the atmosphere shifted when my mother-in-law steered the discussion toward dream vacations. She asked me about my ideal getaway, but her disinterest was palpable. She seemed to be merely waiting for me to finish. Her sudden excitement after my brief response felt contrived, which made me suspicious. It didn't take long for the true motive of their visit and all the peculiar behavior to surface. They wanted our help to finance a vacation home. After years of turning down our financial requests, here they were asking us to contribute to a luxury they desired, a vacation house. They wanted it despite being well off. Why they couldn't save for it themselves was beyond me. They assumed that because I had managed to refurbish my home beautifully, we must be wealthy. Their assumption was so far from the truth. When I probed further to understand their needs and the reasons behind their desire for a vacation home, their explanation was simply that they were bored with their lives and wanted a change of scenery on the weekends. I was astounded and frustrated by their entitlement. As I expressed that we didn't have funds to spare for such extravagances, Bobby's reaction shocked me further. He looked at me as if I had committed a great offense and sternly told me that spending on his parents' happiness was never a waste. His words and glare, suggesting I needed to watch what I say, were baffling and painful. This response underscored a deep-seated issue in our priorities and understanding of financial responsibility. Bobby knew deep down I was right. A vacation house is hardly a necessity, and it certainly isn't a matter of life and death. My father-in-law is still employed, and they have the means to save up for such luxury on their own, but it seemed they preferred to have us foot the bill for their comfort. Then it struck me, Bobby isn't an only child. He has an older brother, Jack. So why weren't they asking him for the money? When I brought this up, the atmosphere became tense. They seemed ready to make my life difficult. It turned out that Jack wasn't as financially stable, or so they claimed. They didn't want to burden him because, unlike us, he had children, and his expenses were primarily directed towards his family. I pointed out that Jack's financial situation was similar to ours. He earned roughly the same, but his funds were allocated to his children's needs. I mentioned our plans to start a family and how continuous financial support to my in-laws could jeopardize our ability to provide for potential future children. Their response was dismissive. Since we didn't have children yet, they argued, we should have funds to spare. This soon morphed into emotional manipulation aimed not at me. They knew I wouldn't budge, but at Bobby. They lamented their loneliness and boredom now that both sons were occupied with their own families. They painted a vacation house as some sort of remedy for their supposed solitude, and Bobby, ever the dutiful son, was swayed by their emotional pleas. I found myself in a precarious position, trying to navigate these increasingly fraught discussions without letting my in-laws sense that they had cornered us. However, the situation escalated drastically. Just a week ago, Bobby and I had the most intense argument we've ever experienced. Though there was no physical aggression, his words were piercing. He declared that the $420,000 he planned to give to his parents wasn't just mine to decide on, suggesting he had the right to do as he pleased with it. He claimed he had been considerate by previously seeking my input, but no longer felt compelled to do so. The argument reached a peak when he actually went ahead and transferred the money to his parents without any further discussion with me. I only learned of this when my mother-in-law casually mentioned receiving the funds. I was livid, not just about the money, but the lack of respect for our mutual decision-making in our marriage. This secretive act on his part left me feeling deeply betrayed, igniting a fierce debate over our financial priorities and respect within our relationship. Bobby was fully aware that I was against his decision, yet he chose to proceed and donate the entire $420,000 he had saved over the years to his parents, not sparing a single dollar for us. When I confronted him, urging him to retrieve the funds, he dismissed me abruptly, insisting on managing his relationship with his parents his way. Despite my efforts to remind him that, as a couple, we should make such significant financial decisions together, he wouldn't listen. Our ongoing disagreements seemed to have exhausted him to the point where, amid a heated argument, he shockingly threatened me with divorce. He yelled, declaring that if I interfered with his decision to support his parents financially, he would end our marriage and leave me. This threat was utterly absurd to me. I had stood by him through every high and low, and now he was ready to abandon our marriage over prioritizing his parents' desires over our collective future. I questioned him. Did he not care about the plans we made together? About building a life, having children, and finding happiness as a unit. None of it seemed to matter to him anymore. His focus was solely on fulfilling his parents' wishes, while I felt neglected and sidelined. In a moment of anger, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. It's been a week since that day, and he hasn't returned home. Despite my numerous texts, calls, and voicemails, he continues to ignore me or leave me hanging. The hurt runs deep because I never imagined something like this could drive Bobby away. I reached out to my in-laws only to discover that Bobby has been staying with them since he left. He hasn't come home once. I'm overwhelmed with stress and confusion about what the future holds, grappling with the fear of what seems like the potential end of our marriage over a disagreement that feels so trivial yet so profound. As the days turned into more than a week, with Bobby not returning home, I reached a pivotal decision point. Initially, I was hesitant, unsure whether severing ties was the right move. But the ongoing chaos, and the blatant disregard shown by Bobby and his family solidified my resolve. If Bobby was threatening divorce, then perhaps that was the inevitable path we were headed toward. So I took proactive steps and contacted my lawyer the first chance I got that morning. My lawyer informed me of my options, not only regarding the divorce, but also about potential legal actions I could pursue given the circumstances. After our comprehensive discussion, another stark realization hit me. I no longer wanted to be tied down by the memories, encapsulated within the walls of the house my mother had left me. The house, once a symbol of maternal love, had become a constant reminder of the tumultuous times with my husband. Determined to move forward, I decided to sell the house. It was entirely in my name, a parting gift from my mother, which legally allowed me to sell it without Bobby's consent, and use the funds as I saw fit. The sale turned out to be quite profitable and significantly eased the financial burden of the legal proceedings. The very next day, after finalizing the divorce papers, I had them sent to Bobby. I knew exactly when he received them because almost immediately after, my phone rang. It was Bobby, furious and incredulous. He ranted about how absurd I was being, claiming he was planning to file for divorce anyway. His shock escalated when he learned about the impending legal actions I had initiated. The call was heated, filled with accusations and disbelief, marking a clear turning point in what had become an irreparable rift. Bobby absolutely lost his temper during our phone call, and it reached a point where I just couldn't tolerate his anger any longer, so I hung up on him midway through. As the days led up to the court case, I was a bundle of nerves, filled with all sorts of apprehensions about the potential outcomes. Thoughts swirled in my head about what could go wrong. What if the court decided against me? What if I ended up losing the money I had made from selling the house? Despite these fears, I didn't let them overpower me. I dressed confidently, put on my best smile, and walked up to the courthouse, ready to face whatever came my way. It was the day of the final hearing for our divorce, and it turned out incredibly well. Not only was I able to retain all the proceeds from the sale of the house, but the court also ruled that Bobby had to pay me a significant sum in alimony as a legal obligation. This outcome was unexpected, especially getting more money from Bobby, but it felt justified considering the emotional and mental toll his actions had taken on me. Accepting this money felt like reclaiming my dignity. The disapproval and dismay on their faces as the verdict was read brought a certain sense of vindication to me. They had probably never anticipated that their actions would backfire so severely. They might have thought they could manipulate me without consequence, but instead, they ended up losing significantly themselves. Since then, life has been relatively calm. I did receive a harsh call from my mother-in-law criticizing my actions, accusing me of being selfish and incapable of caring for others, even going as far as to say I could never start my own family. Despite this, I've been able to move forward. I used the money from the house sale to secure a new apartment for myself, where I could finally save without the constant pressure and demands from others. However, a part of me wonders about the measures I took. Was taking him to court too extreme? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, so please share your opinions in the comments below. It was a surprising turn of events, but one I felt was necessary under the circumstances. I was astounded by the diversity of viewpoints expressed in the comments area of my most recent piece. Allow me to present a brief overview of the comments made. By asking, what's the big deal about giving your parents $420,000 if you have $550,000? A few people were really supporting Bobby. On the other hand, many others strongly disagreed. They agreed with me, pointing out that we've been helping his parents out financially for years as we've worked to build our own savings and secure our future. There was evident disagreement in the comments section. Since the house was legally in my name, a sizable portion of the camp criticized my decision to sell it and pocket the proceeds, calling it disrespectful. About half of the comments, on the other hand, supported my decision, saying that, given the circumstances, it was the right one. So let's have a longer conversation about this. Please leave a remark below, and together we can explore this matter further.